All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. Appreciate you joining us for this event called Funerals Are for Children. I'm John Ricco, FCCFA Executive Director, and we appreciate you being here. And before we introduce our speaker and get started, a few housekeeping items that we wanted to go over with you. The main one being that we have our next upcoming event is Cemetery Con, November 19th. Down in Auburndale, Florida. For those of you who were at this event last year, you remember what a great one it was, and we have an even better one in store for this year. So just to touch real quickly, some of the educational topics we'll talk about, maintenance and repair of lowering devices. We'll have frigid fluid there to go over those items with you. That's always a popular session that we bring back every few years. Then we have a new one for this year from Featured Asset, Embracing Nature to Grow Your Business. And Davey Tree Company is going to be putting on that particular session. And it's really about how some minor improvements and modifications from an aesthetic standpoint can really improve the business at your cemetery. So we think that's going to be a great and interesting session. Then we will have some brief presentations and panel discussion on strengthening the relationships between cemeteries and your business partners. There are monument installers, other funeral directors from other funeral homes coming into your cemetery, and all kinds of traffic in and out. How do you make the most of those relationships and leverage them to help grow and improve upon what you're doing in your cemetery? Then John Abbott is going to do a session, Disinterment Done Right. Obviously, disinterment's not the same as an interment, and there's things you got to do to make sure that you do it right. So he's going to talk about some of the legal and regulatory aspects, as well as the ethical aspects of making sure that when you do a disinterment, you dot your I's, you cross your T's, and you make sure they're done right. And then we have a couple other final sessions, which we're just putting the finishing touches on, about safe operation of heavy equipment in the cemetery. So we're working on finalizing the speaker for that one. And then gas or electric, the pros and cons. Obviously, there's been a lot of advancements with battery technology lately. Those battery operated equipment is um, uh, less noisy, less pollution, more green, if you will, but they are more expensive. And so we'll have somebody, talking to Steel and a couple other vendors about coming in and talking about the pros and cons of electric versus gas powered equipment. So we hope you join us for it. We'll have a lot of fun events in between the sessions, and it'll be a great time for all. So with that, we are going to go ahead and jump into our session. But before we introduce our speaker, a couple other just final housekeeping things. This session has been approved for one CE unit. We know that some of you are at sites where multiple people might be watching in a conference room or that sort of thing. So if you want CE and you're not the person who registered for the event, you need to send your name and your license number to the email address that'll be popping up and floating across the screen sporadically throughout this webinar. Only those who are viewing the live webinar are eligible to obtain CE. So just look for the feeder across the bottom of the screen, and you can send your license number and name, and we'll make sure that you get CE. Asking questions. If you are watching this and you're logged into a YouTube account, you should have a screen pop up on the right side of your screen where you can ask questions. If you're not logged into a YouTube account, you can still ask questions. Once again, you'll see that feeder crawling across the bottom of the screen with my email address. You can send questions into that, and I can ask them on your behalf. So that is how you ask questions. So with that, let me make sure that we have presenter here.
Hello.
All right, I am going to do a brief introduction and then turn it over to Lene. So our presenter today is Lene Strovers. She serves as the trainer for NFDA, the National Funeral Directors Associations, and delivers the NFDA Arranger Training Suite of educational opportunities. She's a first-generation funeral director and strives to help families personalize services to honor their loved ones. She was called to funeral service after the death of a close friend whose cookie cutter funeral didn't tell her story, and she knew there had to be a better way. So she graduated from Des Moines Area Community College with honors in 2012 and has served at Hamilton's Funeral Home since then. She's known for her personalized touch for each family she serves, turning the funeral home into a baseball field, a gaming room, or a classy runway show. She will do whatever she can to help make each service unique and special, reflecting who that person was in life. Lene, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And thank you guys for taking some time out of your day to join me. So I'm assuming everybody can see my slideshow okay and ready to get going here. All right. Well, I had a great introduction, so I don't need to really introduce myself again. I'm so blessed to be able to be in my role at NFDA and being the trainer, but also still working at the funeral home, being a licensed funeral director in Balmer, and still being able to stay helping families and being in that. So I love being able to have that balance. So, this presentation is called Funerals Are for Children. This is not about funerals for children. That's a completely different topic. This is us talking about how important it is to talk to children about death in their families, what it means to die, how to handle those things, and not to just kind of shove them to the side and just be like, sit here and be quiet, and how important it is for us as death care providers to make sure that we are educating the families that we're serving and the public on that. So, what made me think about doing this presentation? I will never forget my first experience with death. My first time seeing a dead body. My great grandma, who I was very close to, had passed away. And I'll never forget it. I was at the back of the church, the casket was open, and I was standing on my tippy toes, touching her face. I ran my hands through her hair, which now as a funeral director, I'm like, oh, Lene, why did you do that? And I remember the funeral director came up to me and he kind of slapped my hands away and told me, you need to be quiet, go sit, don't touch, all of that. And that always really stuck out to me in growing up and being around death and funerals. And so once I started to get more involved in death care, I realized, man, we have such a responsibility to the younger generation and to kids that are attending funerals, because in not very long, those are the individuals that we are going to be sitting across from, and they're the ones who are going to be making the decisions. And if we start them off on a positive journey with death care, they're going to be more apt to wanting to hold those services, see the importance of that, versus if they had a bad experience as a child, they might just have a taste in their mouth that they're like, I don't want anything to do with the funeral home, I don't want to be there. So it's starting very young with a great impression that we can leave on those kids. So, what our game plan is today is talk about understanding the importance of funerals for children, how we can prepare children for that experience, and then also how we can support children after the funeral experience and what we can do there. So in this picture, you can see this is a photo from a yearly event that our firm holds. We invite every family we've served to the zoo. We do that on purpose so that it creates a great space that children can come to. And then we have a dedicated place in the zoo that we do flower planting to help them remember their loved one. So this family in particular, they lost their husband and dad at a very young age to an accidental overdose. And the little kiddo you see standing there, he was at arrangements and he was really having a hard time. He was the one who found his dad and just became very introverted. And so during the arrangement process, I really tried to get him involved, asking him different questions, trying to get him to feel like he was a part of the arrangements instead of just the kid that had to be dragged along there. And that whole process, the day of the visitation, the day of the service, the viewing, all of that, I really kept a lot of focus on him as well as the rest of the family of how he's understanding that. So from the day of the funeral to when they came to this what we call living tribute was 6 months. And he came in and he's like, Lene, I have something for you. And he had written a career paper that he wants to be a funeral director when he grows up because of the experience that he had at the funeral home, and that he wants to help other kids that might be really scared when their parents die. So that was just a very full circle for me. And I like to tell this story because it's some tough situations that we can have, but it can really have a huge impact on these kids. So, understanding the importance for funerals for children, we need to make sure that we're taking care of those little hearts, that we're not just, saying, oh, they're just here because mom and dad can't get a babysitter, or just, oh, they're dragging their kid along. Many times it can be a child's very first experience with death. And this is how we can help making sure that they're allowing them to have grief, allowing them to have emotional expressions, and that's going to help them foster those deep down feelings. A lot of times kids feel like if they're not feeling what everybody else is feeling, that it's a wrong feeling. And especially when we talk about anger in children, that's an okay thing for them to feel because their person died, and be able to create a safe space for them to feel that. I also love any time that you can have families come into your funeral home that has nothing to do with a funeral they are attending. So this is getting families in for open houses, tours, lunch and learns, things like that. So I have a video that a lady that I very much respect made for us, and she shows kids through the funeral home. So I'm going to show this video. This is a thing that our firm does too, and I know a lot of other firms do, is they do an open house tour for children. And so this video does it so well. So I'm just going to switch it over to that, and we can watch this for just a couple of minutes.
Before I came today, I was kind of nervous, but as soon as we kept doing it, it was really fun.
My name's Melissa, and I'm a funeral director. Today, I'm going to spend some time answering your questions and walking you through your funeral home. Now, who's been to a funeral before? You have? Great. How did that make you feel? How was your experience?
Kind of sad.
Yeah, it was sad. I bet it was, because you were there to honor someone that had died, so that is a really sad experience. Yes.
What's the best part about being a funeral director?
Oh man, what's the best part about my job? Being a funeral director? Well, best part I think is getting to be with people like you. To be able to find those moments of joy and help people remember is part of my job, and that's really where I find a lot of happiness.
What I'm really thankful for about this is the deeper understanding, the being able to see the picture boards, the learning about how other people deal with this, seeing the people who really are the backbone. Because when you're at a funeral, you normally don't see the funeral director, and it's important because grieving alone is extremely hard. That's why it's good to come together as a community.
During the visitation, there are so many ways that you, as a child, can honor the person who has died. One of those ways is a memory board featuring photographs of the great things that maybe you or that person's loved one did together.
This is my probably to Bunny. She gave it to me before she passed away. I wanted to share my feelings with other people so they can know how I felt.
Sometimes there are therapy dogs there at the visitation and during the funeral service to help provide comfort to you and the people around you who may be feeling sadness.
When I saw the dog, I was like, wow, because I was expecting. Cremation is when you use fire and turn them into ash and then put them in the urn. I was really glad to learn about cremation. I didn't get to look inside the urn, but the urn was cool.
Communities, cultures, and faith groups celebrate life in many different ways. You may attend a celebration in a chapel, or you may even attend one outdoors. Okay, we have talked about a lot of things today. So, what other questions do you have? What is a casket used for? What is a casket used for? Such a good question. Let's talk a little bit about that. They make these in all sizes. So if someone's particularly tall, we'll take care of that. Or if they need a little bit more width, there's certain caskets for that.
My experience in the chapel is when I got to touch the pillow, it was surprisingly soft, and how the casket actually had like bedding in it, and you can write like love notes and put them in the special compartment in the casket.
Food brings families and communities together, and this gives us an important opportunity to share our love for one another. A lot of times, after we have funerals or celebrations of life, memorial services, we like to gather together, right? We like to talk with our friends, be with our family, and show how much we love each other. Think about when we have a birthday party. What do we have? Food. We have birthday cake.
I think it's a really good thing to have food served because the people who passed away in life, those foods might be their favorite food, and it can honor them.
Here we have an excellent example of something from a culture. Does anybody recognize what this is?
It's
Nava. And what is this?
like a drink with jelly.
Great. And when do you have it?
Mostly celebration. My favorite part of the tour was probably getting to try the Nava because it's like a new experience and learning how another culture is celebrated.
What I like other kids to know is that a funeral is sometimes sad, but sometimes fun too.
Even if someone tells you to go to a funeral, you might not want to. I think it's important to me that you can have a choice.
The sadness that you might feel when you experience the death of a loved one will probably not end when you leave the funeral services. Your feelings matter, so let grown-ups support you. Ask them questions and let them know how you feel. Maybe you'll even get to join a group of kids just like you who are experiencing the same emotions.
It's important to know what dying really means so you're not confused and you know where a friend or family member really is instead of just not ever seeing them ever again and not knowing why. Kids don't have the vocabulary, they don't have the words, ways to say it. And so sometimes I figure you could just draw down all your feelings. Because if other people have experienced the same thing that you're feeling, then it kind of makes me feel like I'm not alone.
As a funeral director, I want you to know that we are here to support you. Don't hesitate to ask us any questions that you might have when you attend a funeral service. We're here to answer those questions and support you in your own unique grief journey.
I think it's so important that kids pay attention at a funeral is because they get to learn a little about the people who have died and they can honor them. Now that I've had a tour of a funeral home, I feel like I'm really less scared.
So that video is with the Funeral Service Foundation, and you guys are welcome to use that. If you can go on the Funeral Service Foundation website, you should be able to find it there. But I know a lot of firms that will use that video. It's just a tool to share with your families and other people as well. So why funerals matter. I think this is not just a discussion for children, but adults as well, is we're having a lot of families that are choosing not to do any types of funerals. They're not doing any type of memorials. And that's where when we break it down, it's not just about the kids, but it's also for the adults. So why is it important? Confronting death's reality. One of the little girls in the video said, if somebody dies and you just don't know where they're at, if you don't have that finalization of where did they go, seeing the person in the casket or seeing that urn there, but being able to find this safe space where people can come together and to grieve. And especially for children, if somebody walks out the door one day and they don't come back and they're not involved with any of the ceremony, that can be a really hard thing for kids to understand. Bringing kids to funerals also helps them celebrate those life and memories. You bring kids to birthday parties, you bring kids to other things in your life that you're celebrating. And so allowing children to come to the funeral and be a part of sharing stories and memories, it reinforces those connections and it lets them allow them to know, hey, this person meant a lot to me. And just because I'm a kid doesn't mean that I don't have those feelings. And I think most importantly is having that structured mourning environment. Having that organization of the funeral, it's going to let kids see that adults that they look up to are, it's okay to mourn, it's okay to feel sad, maybe it's okay to feel frustrated or angry, but also seeing that supportive community. If they are at a funeral and they see all of these people supporting their family, as they grow up, as they grow older, they're going to see the importance of what that is to step in and to help out when maybe a friend or a family member of them have a loss. I love involving children in services. There's so many different ways that you can get kids involved, and it doesn't have to be huge things. It can be the little things. So a lot of times what I'll do is, especially if I have some rowdy bowdy kids, when we're doing maybe the visitation the same day as the service, you can always tell if there's a pile of them that are getting a little antsy. I'll bring them out if we're going to the cemetery, and I will give them a tour of the funeral coach. They absolutely love it. I let them climb in it, out it. We turn the radio on. We play their favorite songs. And then depending on how old the child is, what I can do is I will sometimes give them little jobs to do. So there's many times where I'll have one of the kids and I'll say, okay, your job is to open the back door of the coach when we come out with the casket. I'll have another one take the stopper out. I'll have another one unfold the carpet, and then vice versa. And then they'll help at the cemetery too. That has gone so far with families that it's just very little things to have them involved in. But the kids really enjoyed being a part of it, and it was meaningful to the family as well. I love being able to have, if we can have kids sing at the service, and being a part of it. I also have many churches that they will do a children's service during the funeral. So that's where we can coordinate with that church, and during a portion of the funeral, they'll come up just like a church service, and they'll do about a 5-minute children's service. Sometimes it will be about something that was really important to the person who died, and they can form it around that. Sometimes it's just talking about death itself. So getting involved with the kids in the service doesn't always have to be these huge grand gestures. It can sometimes just be those small things. When we are talking to children about death and dying, terminology is so important. Kids listen and pick up on everything, especially of those that have kids. You guys know this. It doesn't take long for you to say one thing that they maybe shouldn't have heard, and they're repeating it nonstop. And so we have to think that way with death care too. One of the biggest things that I just, it crushes my heart is when I hear parents or guardians telling kids, oh, grandpa's just sleeping, or dad's just sleeping. We don't want to say that terminology, because that's trying to fix something that can't be fixed. And then a lot of times, especially with that analogy of the sleeping, it becomes a fear for that child. It's going to be a fear of them going to sleep. It's going to be a fear of another family going to sleep. So using the correct terminology for their age group is so important. So when you are also dealing with kids and parents and that, knowing what types of terminology to use and that. And we're going to go through some of those age appropriations in here just a little bit. Like I said before, active participation. I love having kids involved. This is at a cemetery that we were doing a burial, and the family wanted to put the dirt on the casket. And so being able to have the kids be there to do it. Also, if you have a candle lighting, and if the kids are old enough to be a part of that. I also really like to, when we're out at the cemetery, if we're handing out the flowers from the casket spray, is that I'll pull the flowers out. The kids will then give them around. They're usually pretty over being at a funeral at that point. And so when you can involve them towards the end of the service, that can really help bring it full circle for the kids as well. When we're talking about allowing children to grieve, this doesn't mean how we want children to grieve. We need to understand that when we're talking to children about death, that grief is very complex. children aren't fully formed and understand all of their own emotions that they are already having. And so being able to have conversation and allow them to know that it's okay if they're confused, it's okay if they're angry, and also having those conversations with their caregivers. One of the programs that we do is we give out handouts to all of the adults that are guardians of a child that has had a loss, and we talk to them about some of the emotions are going to be are going to be very difficult, but it's okay that that anger is there and it's allowing them to have that. Also, having open dialogue. Kids are going to say the darndest things, right? We've heard it. I have 3 kids myself, and sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, what did you just say? But being able to allow and have that open flowing dialogue is where you're going to find out where kids are at with their grief, and not just asking those closed-ended questions, but making sure you're giving those kids those open-ended questions so that they can tell you how they're really feeling, and that they don't need to hide that from the adults and from those that are helping with that. So also modeling healthy mourning. This is where we as the adults and the funeral director really step in. This is how we can express our emotions because kids are going to follow suit for us. The healthier of the environment that we make for the adults to share about their grief and their loss, the better it's going to be for the children as well. Children tend to cope by expressing themselves of misbehaving many ways. A lot of times kiddos will act out, and sometimes that's just out of fear. They might not always understand why they hurt, but they can tell that they hurt. And this is probably one of the biggest things to tackle when we start having kids that are dealing with grief. It's a lot to understand, even as an adult. You feel like your body physically hurts from the emotional pain, and that's hard for us to understand, even us that are in death care. How do you expect these little kiddos to have that? And so one of the things that we do, if we have some kiddos that are struggling, maybe a little antsy, and you can kind of tell there's some anger, some frustration there, is we will take a group of kids out into the parking lot, and we have kind of a safe space there, and we'll do some outside activities, and we will include in that running in place, doing different things with their hands. We allow them to yell and scream to get it out, and just taking 5 minutes to do that with the kids, they will come back, and it's crazy. It's like they had a release of that strong emotion, and they were allowed to do that. They weren't going to get in trouble for it. And then coming back into the funeral as a safe space, they're usually a little bit better well behaved. All right, so I want to talk about how we can prepare children for the funeral experience. This is if we are getting ready to serve a family, if we know that there's a death in the family, or if there's been a death in like the school or anything like that. How can we prepare the students, the children coming to the funeral ahead of time so they're just not walking in blind to it? So I think it really depends on the ages. So ages 2 to 4, their level of understanding what death is very different. It's very, very basic. So children at this age think that all things that move are alive. So it's either you're alive or you're dead. And they don't really understand the full concept of it. So it's very, very simple. Children also from ages 2 to 4, they think that if something is dead, it can come back to life. Thank you for all of the cartoons for making people think that that's how it works. Video games, all of that really takes away from that finality of what death is in that age range. They don't know anything other than that. Children also in this age think that they're never going to die. Only old people die. Nobody their age would ever die. Their parents would never die. Anybody that's close to them, that just doesn't resonate in their head when they're ages 2 to 4. When you start getting a little bit older, ages 5 to 8, it starts to change a little bit. Children will start to understand a little bit more about what death means. So this is where children understand that when something dies, that those physical functions ceased. Plants die, animals die, and a lot of times at this age, that's where they've maybe had a family pet that has died, and they understand the concept there. They also start to understand that once you die, you cannot come back to life. So when their family pet dies, the dog doesn't come back. When grandma dies, she doesn't come back. So they're starting to recognize that a little bit more as well. And then, as a universal concept, there, children don't take death personally. As as the younger ages too, it's not going to happen to them. It only happens to old people, sick people, and so that seems so far off. A lot of times, when we do a grief group of ages 5 to 8, I will ask the kids how old they think I am, and they usually think I'm like 105. So they don't have a concept of age really, and a concept of what old is, and especially if somebody in their close circle dies, that's not what they would consider old, can be very hard for them to understand. Once we hit ages 9, 10, teenagers, they have a really good understanding of the main concepts of what death is. They've probably had a death in the family, or they've had a death of a family pet, but they're starting to mature and to really understand a lot of the concepts of what comes into and what death means. So being able to know where each of these age groups is emotionally and psychologically is important when you're having these conversations. One thing I would really, really stress to get implemented into your funeral home, if you do not, is what's called first view support. So, first view support is where you will have a funeral director who's going to be the person that would be everything that you would typically do during a first view. This would be, making sure folders are proofed, making sure hair is okay, cosmetics is okay, all of those types of things, and doing that with the adults. But then you would have another staff person. It could be a funeral director, it could be a part time person, it can just be somebody in your funeral home that has a gift for working with children. What they will do is they will do a first view with the children. And I'm going to walk through what some of those ideas are there. So, like I said, have 2 staff members involved. You can't do the children's first view and the adult first view as the same person. You really want to find 2 people so you can dedicate that. Engage in a discussion about what the funeral home is for, what's it used for, what are they here, and have a little bit of a talk about what that final disposition for their person is specifically. What I'll also do is if it's a casket, I'll describe the casket, maybe the color, the shape, maybe if there's something special to it. This goes hand in hand if it's an urn to, explaining that, so that the kids are starting to build a visual in their heads before they walk into the room. I also like to talk to them about what their special person is going to feel like if they choose to touch the skin, and why that's going to feel different. So, how I explain that to children is that when you're alive, your heart is pumping blood, and that's what's going through your body and keeps you warm and makes you feel like you're alive. But once somebody has died, that blood is no longer pumping. And so they're going to be cool to the touch and maybe feel a little bit different. The next part of that first view support is discussing the room, what it's going to look like, where the body is going to be, what types of flowers there are, anything that I can do to help build up of what the space is going to look like, what they can do to feel as comfortable so they're not walking into a surprise. I also like to ask any questions the child wants to ask before we walk in the room and giving them space to talk about that. Then once we get to the point to go into the room, we'll go in. And what I like to do is point out the details that we previously discussed. This lets me show them, hey, this is what we talked about, and it's right here. So you're building that trust with that child. And that is going to really help them feel comfortable in the space. I like to give them the opportunity to see their special person's body. I like to give them some space and say, I'm right here. I'm here to answer any questions that you have. I get probably the most question that I get from children is where are their feet and legs? And so there's many times that I know that how the foot end is going to be okay for me to open. And with permission of the parents or guardians, I will open the foot end of the casket to show that the legs and feet are still there. I had a grown man that I was making funeral arrangements with. He was in his mid 50s, and his dad was very, very tall. And when we were making arrangements, he did not bring any pants in or shoes, which was fine. But I, shared with him, I said, Dad will still need some pants. And he goes, but Dad's really tall. I just assumed that you would have to cut part of his legs off so he wouldn't need any pants. And I kind of was taken aback by this. But then he told me, he's like, that's what I've always been told. When I was a kid, my uncle told me this and that. And so even though he was a grown adult, he took something that he was told as a child that makes no sense whatsoever, but he always hung on to that. And so that's just shows the importance of, the things that we say to kids, how we handle death and dying for the kids is so important because they're going to carry that with them till they're adults and they're the ones that were sitting across the table. In that instance, for that gentleman, when we did the first view for his dad, I had actually had the casket all the way open, so he was able to see how we handled that his dad's legs were so tall. I did not want him to ever have that misconception that there was any harm or anything done to his dad's legs, and he really appreciated that. And so that was just, again, a great example of taking what kids hear and just always listening to it and not when you really should know better. When we start talking about viewing of the body, this is where you're going to really need to assess, if there's any trauma to the body, if there's anything that's not age appropriate to talk about. But I really like to talk through the specifics about what they're going to see, especially if it is a gentleman that has died and the gentleman has to have heavy cosmetics, which is not what they're used to seeing. Maybe if it's a woman, they're used to seeing them with makeup on and it looks a little weird for a man. And so I will explain why that is. I will also tell them they don't have to look up close. If they want to stay in the back, that's just fine. If they want to go up close, that's just fine too. I really like to use art when it comes to helping children where they can draw a photo or they can write a note and they can put it in the casket that way to have them be involved that way. We also do a lot where people will sign the caskets, and we find that a lot of children like to come up and to be a part of that when it is somewhat of an activity. A lot of questions we get for children is how to explain cremation to children. So I have 2 slides here. You guys are welcome to steal my wording and use it how you want. This is the wording that I have come up with to how to explain cremation to children, but I also use it many, many times when I am explaining it to adults that don't understand the concept of cremation either. So this is the wording that we use when we're talking to children. When a body is cremated, the person's body is placed in a special box. Sometimes this is a wooden casket, but often it is a cremation container made of thick cardboard or wood. That box is put into a room or a chamber called a crematory, where it gets very, very hot. The heat helps to change the person's body into cremated remains very quickly. It usually takes 2 to 3 hours. After the cremation is finished, all that are left are bones. There are tiny pieces as well as large pieces of bone. These bone pieces are then placed into a machine called a processor, which changes the bones so they are the texture of sand or powder. The cremated remains or ashes are gray in color, the color of your bones. When a person's body is buried, it takes many, many years for the body to change to ashes or cremated remains. So that's what's worked really well for me when explaining cremation to children. So when we start talking about the funeral process to children and going through everything with them, I like to make sure that we have a clear structure. I like to give them a layout of what we're going to do for the day. So when I'm doing that first view, I'll tell them, we have a visitation till this time, then we're going to have a service And what that involves, maybe it's the minister, there's a couple of different songs. Then I'll let them know we're going to the cemetery, or maybe we're having lunch. I give them a game plan to the day so they know what's coming up instead of just being drug along for the ride. They have an idea of what we're doing. I also let them know that there's going to be some emotional aspects to what we're doing, that they may see their parents cry. They may hear some stories that might make them laugh and make them think about their loved one. There may be a song played that might be a little emotional. And if they have any concerns about that, we'll listen to that. I like to always know what songs are being played at the service, and I can say those to the children and say, do any of these have any special meaning to you? And then allow the child to talk and share that story if there is. Probably the hardest thing that we as funeral directors have to handle is when we have friends of other young children that have died. These are 3 girls. Their names are Juno, Harper, and Arabella. Unfortunately, they were going to visit their grandparents on spring break. They were with their dad, and dad accidentally crossed the center line, and a semi hit and killed all 3 girls instantly. When I met with mom, of course, she was devastated. She just lost her whole family. But she was also very concerned about how their friends were going to handle the loss of all 3 of the girls. They were very close in age. They all went to the same school, and it was going to be very, very difficult. What we decided to do is that even though the girls were not viewable, we decided to have caskets at the service that they were in. This was a decision that both me and mom worked through so that they could visualize that their friend was there. Mom did not think that if we had 3 urns there, that the students would really be able to understand, what had happened. It's kind of hard to see in this picture, but each one of the caskets has a little basket on it. And we created this so that students could make art project notes, cards, and go and put them into each one of the baskets as a way to remember them by. What we also did for this service is we teamed up with the school. So I went and spoke at the school and let the students that wanted to come. And I talked about what they were going to see, what they weren't going to see. We also sent home a flyer to the parents so that they knew what we were talking about, and also gave them some pointers on things to talk to their children too. For the visitation itself, we wanted to make it a welcoming and safe space for each of the kids. So we created the craft tables. We also had volunteers from the school that were teachers or guidance counselors so that there was a familiar face. We had a candle lighting station. We had a cookie decorating station. We had sidewalk chalk station outside, and really tried to create a space where the girls' friends could really come and honor their friends that was age appropriate for them. This was an email that we received from one of the teachers afterwards, and I want to read this to you, not of a, oh, look what I did, but more of just understanding how important it is of looking at who's coming to the service. At the end of the evening, when the crowds had thinned out, it was mainly the girls' closest friends there. They were walking around with cookie on their faces, making things for the girls, and interacting with their mom. They weren't scared in the least. Our younger ones were playing and creating at the activity tables. The older girls were sharing their memories with each other as they watched the slideshow. I saw both laughter and tears. All of our teachers were talking about how everything about the evening captured the girls perfectly. It was such a healthy place for our kids and teachers to celebrate the life of Juno, Arabella, and Harper. Thank you for giving us this special gift. When we involve children in the funeral process, it really drives home the significance of participation in rituals, which is something that I think we're losing in funeral service right now, and we're trying to bring it back. The importance of coming together, the importance of viewing the body, the importance of having a memorial service, whatever that means to your family, having some sort of a ritual. Engaging these children in this ritual is going to be able to help us as we get farther down the road.
Hey, Lene, we've got a question here that
Sure.
might be a good time for this. It's
Yeah.
what advice would you give parents who are unsure about bringing their child to a funeral?
So we get a lot of phone calls at the funeral home saying, should I bring my child to the funeral? This is how old they are. At the end of the day, it's the parent's decision. But when we talk to them, we always say our funeral home is a safe space for children. You can come in. We have a space in the funeral home that you can watch the funeral from live streamed. So if you feel that your child's going to be disruptive or that's going to be too much, but we always suggest to families, bring your child in. We'll make you comfortable. We'll help you answer those hard questions and being able to support the parents. Sometimes the parents don't want to bring their child to the actual funeral, and then we'll get phone calls later of asking how to answer questions, and we have some support for that too. So we always say, bring the child, and we will address and try and make you as comfortable as possible for where you're at. So we always say yes. All right. So then this next part here, this is supporting children after the funeral. And I think this is probably my favorite part of what I get to be a part of. Many times we help these amazing families, and after the funeral, we don't get to see them again. And I think that's such an injustice both to the families and to us as funeral directors. We have such a huge impact on these families' lives during this important time, but then as soon as the funeral's done, you don't always see them. And so this is a program that we've created to not only continue to serve your community, but to continue to serve the families that you've been serving. And again, I think it's so important to get people into your funeral home through other ways just than the funeral. So as we are looking at the different types of ways that kids mourn after the funeral, is there's individual personality traits are going to have a big difference on this. Cultural backgrounds play a huge role in how kids feel that they can mourn. Same with adults, developmental stages, and just how they have how they've seen grief. Younger children might show grief through play and art, where older children are going to be more about talking, reflecting. And then caregivers need to adapt their approaches. Every child is going to be very different, especially in families that have more than one child. One child might react one way and one child might not, or might react another way, and just reinforcing to the adults that it's okay how these children are reacting. So one of the great things that we do, and I know there's other firms out there that do this too, is hold grief groups. So we have 2 grief groups that we do for children. There's Little Hands, which is ages 4 to 7, and then Healing Hearts, which is age 8 to 12. So Little Hands. So this is a 3-session grief program that we do for children ages 4 to 7. During the program, the kids come, they have an opportunity to talk with other kids in their own age group. And one of the most unique things that happens here is kids at this age don't have a concept that anybody else's dad could have died or anybody else's mom could have died. And we will sit in a circle, and we have a ball that we roll to each other, and you say your name, you say how old you are. We usually come up with a funny thing to say, like what's your favorite snack, and then we ask them, who was your special person that died. And as these kids are going around the circle and you see somebody that their mom died and then somebody else's mom died, they just instantly connect because they're like, oh my gosh, I'm not the only kid in the world that has had a mom die. We also use, you can see in the picture here, this is Hamilton the bunny. It is a hand puppet. There are so many times kids do not feel comfortable talking to adults. You bring out Hamilton the bunny or whatever you would want to use, and they will tell Hamilton the bunny how they're feeling. They feel like that's a safeguard of letting them express their feelings and thoughts, that it's to this puppet versus to a real person. So Little Hands is one of my favorite programs. They also like to tell you all their family secrets. So there's been many times where we've been going around the circle, what do you remember from your person's funeral? and we hear a lot of the family drama, so that's always interesting too. So you got to filter that out as well. Another part that we do with this, and that I've seen other firms do, is on the first day we actually have one of our funeral directors sit down with the parents, and we talk through why the kids are in one group with the funeral directors, the parents will be with another. We'll talk through, give them the tools to talk to their kids and support them at home. If the parents are needing some support as well, we have a lot of options for them that way too. So we're not only serving just the children, but serving the parents as well. The older group, Healing Hearts, this is, again, it's a 3-session grief program, but we go more in depth because ages 8 to 12, it really gives them that opportunity to interact with somebody that has had the same loss. We've seen a lot of friendships that have been formed in this. And then my favorite part about this session is we end with a show and tell that we invite all the family members to. And the kids will talk about their special person. They will bring an item of their special person. And we just see this change from just the first session to the end session of kids going from being very quiet to not wanting to really address anything about their person dying to being so open and wanting to share about their person. So that's been a beautiful thing to see. So here's just a couple other pictures from Healing Hearts and Little Hands. That's just what we happen to call it. If this is something that you think, oh my gosh, this would be great to implement in our program, give me a call. I can walk you through some of the things that we do, the games we play that are geared towards grief, all of that. But it's really been positive in our community. NFDA has some great resources for you guys as well. These are free resources from the Funeral Service Foundation. When a Child Dies is a great resource to help you get your name out in the community as well. What we do here in Des Moines with our When a Child Dies is we have actually gotten these and we get them into the hands of our pediatric hospice nurses. So, and our children's hospital. So the families that have had a child die, they can get this way before they even meet with us as a funeral director. Youth in Funerals is a great resource for you to be able to give those out to your families. These are all free to any of you that are NFDA members. You just need to pay the shipping. You can go onto the website and you can order as many of these as you want. And so it's just a great resource that you can have to do that. Some other resources, Remembering a Life has some great ideas. They have blog posts, podcasts, different guides for you guys. There's a lot of material out there when it comes to grieving children. If this is something that you feel there's a need in your community, or you want to serve a family just a little bit more in depth when it comes to the children, this is the way to do it. I get a question a lot of, do you open this up to everybody, or are these just to the families that you serve? And for us, we have decided to open it up to every family, not just families we've served. We have kept kind of a little tally, and we have found out that if a family has not initially used our funeral home, but then they send their child through one of our grief programs, most of the time after that, they will choose to use our funeral home instead, because they have seen our commitment to the community with their children in that. We're seeing now where the children that we had in our grief groups 10, 15 years ago, those are the ones that were sitting across from the table. And, a lot of times we ask our family, why did you choose our firm? And we hear a lot, because I went through your grief program when I was a kid. And so being able to have that long impact in the community has been really great. So it's also a way to advertise without advertising, being a support in your community and being that resource for them. So that is all that I have. I don't know if anybody wants to talk about what they're doing. I know we're in a little bit of a different dynamic but if anybody has great ideas, or like I said, if you guys want to get ideas from me or have any other more in-depth conversation, this is my cell phone number. This is my email address. If you have questions, you can email them to John and we can go through that.
All right, Lene, I do have one question here. Let me just go to my inbox to see if anything else is coming. No. Okay. This one, let's see. In your opinion, what might be the long-term benefits for children who are included in funeral rites compared to those who are not?
I think it goes back to what families are choosing for funerals right now. NFDA loves their studies. They love their polls. They love all their stuff. And it's really interesting because this is the first year that the age group from 18 to 25 is saying, yeah, we need a funeral. We need a viewing. We need that closure, because when our grandparents died, our parents made the decision of not having any type of a service, and that was really hard for us. And so we're starting to see, because that generation that's now sitting across the table from us that are making those funeral arrangements are realizing how important that ritual is, that the saying goodbye, all of that is. And that starts with teaching children about grief at a young age.
Thanks. All right, nothing in the chat. Let me just go to email one more time before we let you go. Nothing in the email. Well, Lene, thank you very much for taking your time to do this webinar. For
Yes,
those of you
absolutely.
who are out there, if you didn't catch the previous one we did with Lene, she did a great one on cremated remains, and it's on our members only channel, so you can go watch that one as well. That was another great webinar. So thanks once again, Lene. We very much appreciate it, and have a great rest of your week. And thanks for those of you who are watching.
Absolutely. Have a good day, everybody.